everyone. Thanks for stopping by the Time We Discuss studio. Today I have a children's book author. This is a good one, so we're going to get right into it. Today on Time We Discuss, I have award-winning children's book author Aubre Andrus here. Aubre, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Aubre, you've written over 50 books for kids, worked with publishers including Disney, Scholastic, and American Girl, to name a few. You've ghostwritten titles for YouTube stars like Ryan's World and Slime Queen Karina Garcia. You launched your own indie children's press with the Lookup series. Aubre, to put it mildly, you are getting stuff done. So many things I'd like to cover, but we only have a small window. Let's start with this. What is a typical day like for a children's book author?
That's a good question. It can be different every day. I usually have about 3 projects going on in like various stages of completion. So that's usually my priority. I might be meeting with an editor just over the phone to kick off a book project, or I might be turning in some edits and waiting, or turning in a manuscript and waiting for some edits to come back in. I might be executing those edits and sending off a final draft. And then other things could be, I might be doing a school assembly, like talking to kids in a classroom. Like on the weekends, I might be doing like the LA Times Festival of Books, or like the American Library Association conference, something more networky like that. And yeah, otherwise I might just be thinking up new book ideas, or maybe going for a walk because I have some writer's block, trying to get out in the world as well as not just sitting in my chair, because I will say that a lot of this is spent at home alone at your desk in front of your computer screen. So it's important to get out in the world too.
It's interesting. You bring up writer's block. How do you fight off writer's block? What do you do when that starts to really take hold of you?
I know I said the word writer's block because it's commonly used, but I don't technically believe it, in writer's block. I feel like you just need to have a change of scenery and get out there. Like, just honestly step away from the computer for a bit. I think it's more of just hitting like a mental rut, like a block. And yeah, it can be really hard to write so many books and come up with ideas and keep that like energy going. So that's why it's especially important to, when you feel that kind of like exhaustion coming on, to just like step away. Like it's not really about pushing through it, because if your brain is just feeling muddled, like sometimes it's more productive to actually go do something else, go work out, go for a walk, go eat, whatever it is, and then come back to your computer a little bit more refreshed.
Are you the kind of person that will keep and I'm going to go old school. Do you keep like a tablet and pen nearby in case all of a sudden you get an idea and you want to jot that down? Do you do something like that?
I do. Yeah, I definitely have a Google Doc with like a million. It's actually like a spreadsheet with tabs, with all these book ideas. But the second I get it, I do need to like write it down somewhere, because otherwise I will forget. And you think you won't, but you absolutely will. Like you're like, oh, that's such a good idea, or such a good title or something. Like there's no way I'll forget that. And then, at least for me, I absolutely forget it. So it needs to be captured immediately somewhere. Usually like I have Post-it notes all over my desk. And then, yes, so then it goes in the Google Doc. Or if it's an idea for a particular manuscript, I will pop into that document and just jot it down at the top or something. So I'm always keeping those notes and writing everything down, especially when I'm working on multiple projects.
And how many projects do you typically have going on at one time?
Usually about 3. That
Okay.
is kind of the sweet spot for me, I guess. They might vary in length. If they're 3 shorter projects, like maybe I can take on a big one on top of that. I don't know. It just depends on the size and scale of the project, because we're talking about kids' books. Sometimes it's just a short story. Sometimes it's an early reader, so those are much smaller projects, or maybe I have the capacity to take on a few more, projects beyond that.
Do you typically aim for a particular age range, or are you kind of all over the map? Like this book is for, I don't know, it's like a very young kids, like a 5 to 8, another one's more like an 8 to 12, or are you a little more honed?
Yeah, I would say my like specialty is 8 to 12, which is called middle grade. So ages 8 to 12. If you get higher than that, kind of like 13 and up, that's young adults. I haven't done a ton of young adult. Picture books are more like ages 4 to 8. And then early readers kind of falls in that range as well. Maybe it's, 5 to 7 or whatever. It depends on which leveled readers is what they're called. So which, reading range you're in. But yeah, I've kind of done everything. But I think my favorite is that ages 8 to 12 middle grade range.
I saw that you have a background in journalism and I believe filmmaking. That was what you went to school for. So how has that translated into the work that you currently do? Has that had much of an impact or not so much?
Yeah, my journalism degree has actually been very helpful. So I started in kids magazines. And honestly, I picked journalism because at the time I knew I loved writing and I loved magazines. And at the college I chose to go to, basically my options were like English or journalism. And I just wasn't that excited about a basic like English major or like more general major. And if they had had something more on the publishing children's book path, I think I would have taken that, but that wasn't an option for me. But journalism ended up being super helpful because I learned how to research and I learned how to interview people and I learned how to like find a story like in real life and I learned how to write fast and write on deadlines. And it's really, I've ended up doing mostly nonfiction for kids. So kids love reading nonfiction books. You know, if you go to like the Scholastic book fair or something and you see books on dinosaurs and you know, all different types of animals. Kids love reading about animals. So it's actually ended up being very helpful for me. And yeah, I'm surprised at how helpful my journalism degree ended up being for my children's book author career.
Now, when you are planning out a book, do you do any kind of, and I'm thinking about like your film degree, for instance, do you do any kind of like storyboarding, visualization, or does that not play into your creative path at all?
I do have like a book map, it's called, and it does look like a storyboard where it's kind of like a spread, you know, so 2 pages and it's just, you know, multiple little groups of boxes. And usually I'm just writing words in that box, you know, like this will be the spread on this. Here's where we start this. This is where chapter 2 is. And this is mostly for my nonfiction projects. If something were to be fiction, an outline would look a lot different, you know. But yeah, that's kind of how I do it. As a children's book author, I don't have to worry as much about the visual side of things because there's an art director who takes care of all the illustrations, all the graphic design, you know, all the formatting and the layout. So I certainly work in tandem with them. So I'm cognizant of it. Like, is this book going to be too long? Is it going to be too short? You know, it still needs to fit a visual format. Or like, are we gonna have a full page photo opener for these chapters? You know, like what will that look like? Because it will affect the page count and how I distribute my, you know, information.
Now, talking about the layout that you were just describing, how much input do you have, especially with like a larger publisher? How much input do you have over any kind of visual creative design? Do you get much of that, or at the larger houses, it's like they have people that they know what's best, they take care of it?
Yeah, they mostly take care of it. I mean, they're looking for me to provide art notes. So even on like a fiction story, I'm working on something for Disney right now, like a short fiction story, and we've already broken it up, you know, by page or by spread, and I have art notes on each page. You know, this is what this should look like, you know. So I certainly give my help like in I think my goal is to like help the designer or the illustrator like make their lives more easier, but at the end of the day they're going to make the final decision of like what looks best, you know.
Now, how about when it comes to promoting the book? Obviously, the publishing company, they're going to be in charge of most of the promoting. Do they do that, a lot of that stuff for you, or is it not? Is it more you going out, contacting the schools about speaking? How does that all work for you?
Yeah, it really depends on a per project and per author, you know, basis. A lot of times the publishers will arrange a lot of events. So I've had a lot of things arranged for me, but then it certainly is, I wouldn't say expected, but appreciated if you can also go find some opportunities on your own. And generally speaking, their, you know, length of time they're going to spend on marketing your book is a pretty short window. So if you want anything past like that launch, it's on you to kind of find that, you know. So for a launch, they'll certainly like assist in setting up things. They'll set up some things for you, but beyond that, like they're moving on to the next project that they're going to promote. And so it's going to fall on you to keep promoting that project.
Okay, and that's pretty typical.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, you'll hear, I mean, you'll really hear things all over the board. It depends on the publisher and the project and, you know, how marketable you are, like what the angle is, what the timing is. Like maybe there's some, you wrote a book about, you know, the moon and we're about to land on the moon and there's these, and you're also a astrophysicist and now there's so many great marketing opportunities for you, but sometimes it's not like the perfect storm of, of marketing opportunities, so things won't line up like that.
Maybe about 2 weeks ago, the video actually hasn't gone live yet. Actually, I think it goes live a month ago. It doesn't matter when it goes live. But I was speaking with someone a couple weeks ago, and she was talking about her experience having one of her novels published. And she was saying the timeline for her was about 18 months from, I think she said, from the time it was submitted until it was actually printed and distributed, I think. Is that a similar timeline with what you experienced with children's books, or is it different?
Yeah, I would say I usually tell people 2 years is like a good guess as to how long it might take. Um, it's just a very slow process for traditional publishing. And yeah, passing, your writing portion is probably the shortest, quickest time. And then you're talking about designing a book, illustrating a book, formatting it, and then sending the files off to a printer in China who's actually going to print the book and then ship it on a boat, over to the US and then it gets distributed. So yeah, it's a long, slow process.
Okay. Talking about boats and shipping, that just reminds me, a few months back, my kids wanted to order some Lego pieces from the Lego company, and
Mhm.
some of the pieces actually come from over in Europe, and some of them come from, I want to say Illinois. I could be wrong, but locally, and others are from overseas. And the ones that come from overseas, it says expect 30 days. And my one son was like, "Why does it take so long?" I was like, "I don't know. I wonder if they're shipping it by boat or something. I have no idea."
Yeah, totally.
So when it comes
Um,
to to promoting the book and the different events that get set up, do you have to travel a lot for that? Is that normal for someone of your caliber, or what does that look like?
for me, I would say that's not totally normal. It's usually local events. Like the thing, I have been flown, around the like Midwest for a little book tour, but I would say what's most likely is that your publisher helps you set up some events with like local bookstores. And generally speaking, for author events, the bookstore will partner with you, and oftentimes they maybe aren't even carrying your book, but they will go ahead and order some copies specifically for this event, and then you're sort of expected to bring in the crowd, like you get your friends and family to come, and it's not really assumed that like the bookstores are going to be, they'll do a little bit of marketing, but like they're not going to draw in like super duper crowds. So you'll often see, I don't like if you've ever, anyone who's listening to this and is mildly interested in the publishing world may have seen authors on Twitter or on Instagram share like their embarrassment that they had a book event and no one showed up, and it's like this total common thing with authors, because if you're not in your hometown bringing in your friends and family, the likelihood of a bunch of people showing up for this random book are like pretty small, unless you're like a super well-known author, like we're talking big time author. So yeah, it's kind of a common misconception. You're not going to sell a ton of books. I think authors, like aspiring authors, dream of like the day they could have an event at a bookstore, and I don't like love them because it's just so much pressure to like bring in your own people and like ask your friends and family to come. And I live in Los Angeles now. I'm not near like my extended family. And so I've had a couple book events around here, and it's like my neighbors and some friends are coming, but like not a ton of people. And so it can be a very awkward part of being an author.
That's really good information, because I can envision people not realizing that could be a reality, and as they're aspiring to be writers and not realizing what these events might actually look like and some of the challenges that go along with it.
Yeah.
People might need to be comfortable with, one, asking people to come to my event,
Oh, for sure.
but also be comfortable with the possibility that people don't show up.
Yes, absolutely. And so if you ever see an author sitting at a table at a bookstore, go say hi to them and go just ask them what their book is about. Like just start up a conversation. They'll be so appreciative.
You said that you went to school for journalism. Do you think that is more helpful? And again, a single data point here, but do you think that's equally as important or more important as going for, say, creative writing or English if someone wants to pursue writing? What's your opinion on something like that?
Yeah, well, I wish someone had kind of told me that you don't have to major in writing to be a writer. Like, I think I'm a less interesting writer because I majored in writing. Like, I think it's far more interesting when someone's like an engineer and then can write a book for kids about engineering. So you don't have to have that background if you are a good writer and you're willing to learn. Like, this is why editors exist. This is why ghostwriters exist. publisher's specialty is making these books, I would almost argue that the writing is the easy part. You know, it's the marketing and maybe the design that becomes more challenging. And I'm a writer, so I'm biased, but you don't have to have that background. I think you need to have, I think the most important thing is to just immerse yourself in like the children's media world. And so that could be, you know, through volunteering with kids or watching stuff with your kids or just reading stuff on your own. But there is a certain like tone to children's books. And I'm talking about modern, like looking at stuff that's out there today. Like, of course, we all have classic children's books we love, but that's not what they're publishing today. And it's not, you know, what's going to sell today. And so that's, if you want to be traditionally published, you need to be aware of what's selling today and what kids are watching today. And so, you know, there's a lot of tips you'll learn just about like, if you're writing, like a lot of people wonder what's the difference between middle grade and young adults. And there's like a good tip I learned where it's like middle grade, they're more about like those stories are more about finding their place within their like home and maybe a little bit beyond, you know, in their community, like within their family. But whereas young adults, it's like they're finding their place in the world, you know. So there's just these subtle, you know, things that you need to learn about writing for kids. And you don't ever want to be too preachy or too teaching a lesson. And you don't want, if you're writing fiction, you don't want the parents to be the one always solving the problem. You know, we're used to watching like Full House or, you know, where Danny Tanner is always going to be, thanks, Dad, for telling that to me, you know, like, or the parents are preaching the lesson and the kids are like, that sounds great. I get it now. And that's not really how editors and agents want you to write for kids these days. So I think that's what's most important, is really having a grasp on like children's media and having some experience with kids today. And before I had kids, I volunteered in a school with a writing program, and that's how I was able to, and with Girl Scouts. So that's how I was able to get that experience.
That I'm going to call it lesson for lack of better words, that lesson you learned where you know, the subtle differences between like young adults or children's and how the problems get solved, is that something you picked up from like the publisher steered you in that direction, or is it more from being at conferences and talking to people, or through volunteer efforts? Where does that knowledge actually come from?
Yeah, I would say I mostly learned that through conferences. And so if you're interested in breaking into children's publishing, the best place to go is the Society of Children Book Writers and Illustrators. And so it's scbwi.org. It's kind of a mouthful. But they have 2 conferences per year, and they're a really great like entry level point to kind of immerse yourself in these topics and start learning these little tricks. And learn what editors and agents are looking for, you know, right now these days. The Highlights Foundation, you know, just Highlights Magazine, they basically have an organization called the Highlights Foundation that does writing retreats. They do workshops. Some of them are virtual. So they're a great resource too, because it's hard to find writing resources specifically for the children's book industry. You know, it's very different from writing for adults. And so there are just very few resources that I can point you to that are specifically for children's books. And that's where you're going to, you know, those are the places you're want to go to find that information.
When it comes to getting started, someone writes a book, we'll say, or they have a manuscript. What do they do next? What was your experience like? Can you send unsolicited manuscripts to publishing companies? Do you need to get an agent? What does that look like?
Yeah, there's a couple different paths you can take. I mean, for traditional publishing, and if you go to these writers' conferences, they're often going to preach that you need an agent, and then you go on to the agent then takes your manuscript to a publisher, you know, to an editor who then purchases the manuscript, and then you've got your book deal. But there are publishing houses out there that do take unsolicited manuscripts, and so you could work directly with an editor. My experience was actually through kind of like what I like to call a little secret backdoor of publishing, and it was through work for hire projects. So I had a lot of experience writing for a kids magazine. And so after I left that kids magazine and went freelance, I was able to leverage that experience to then write books for kids. And a lot of publishers are developing concepts in-house, and they need a writer to execute it. So it's like, just like freelance writing, like you would write for a magazine or a newspaper, but this time, or a website, but this time you're writing for a publisher. So a lot of it is like intellectual property. That's why I do stuff for like Disney Princess. And so you're writing for well-known characters, a well-known series. That's how I got into ghostwriting, because they've had some kid YouTube stars who they wanted to put a publishing program around, but obviously a 5-year-old can't write a book. So they asked me to step in. And so, yeah, so that's another way to break in as well, is looking for this work for hire, these work for hire opportunities. If you have like a freelance writing background and have experience writing for kids in particular, that could be a nice path to kind of jump into publishing. And then you make these connections with these editors and you could pitch your own ideas directly to them as well.
Sticking with ghostwriting for a second. So my understanding of ghostwriting is that you essentially write something, but your name is not attached to it. Is that a correct presumption?
It depends. Yeah. So sometimes your name is not on it at all. Sometimes your name is very tiny in the credits on like the inside page, like text by Aubrey Andrus. And sometimes it's right on the cover, within tandem with the author, because you were considered, the ghostwriter, they are the author. So I've done all three of those. So I've sometimes I'm not allowed to talk about a project. I sometimes have my name super tiny, and then quite a few times I've had my name right on the cover with the author or the expert, which is nice.
Now, what does that do to your ego? Is that something? And obviously, it's going to be different for every person. But for you personally, you work on a project, you might put a lot of sweat and tears into it, and then your name is completely omitted. What's that like psychologically?
Yeah, I mean, I need to get better about like being clear with the editor up front and asking like, really being clear, like, is my name going to be on this, whatever, because I think if the expectation is set from the beginning, then it's fine. You know what you're getting into. For whatever reason, it's just not sometimes. And I think I think also they're like weird, there's a little bit of like weariness, like, are we even gonna like this ghostwriter? Do we even want their name attached to it? And if they love it, sure, let's give them an author credit, it really just depends. So I'm kind of over it, at this point, as long as your name is on the paycheck, they say. But it can hurt a little bit, like I've mentioned before on an interview that like one of my books was on Good Morning America, and I didn't even know about it. And like the picture was in Times Square. And I was like, well, I would have liked to be there at least. I wish someone would have told me. Like they didn't even tell me. So that's a bummer to be sort of like left out of the promotional side of it. Like I don't need to be on Good Morning America, but I think it would have been cool just to be in the audience, like there are tricky things like that. But honestly, even if you write traditionally published book and you're not the ghostwriter, things like that can happen too. It's like you kind of sold your idea to a publisher and they're going to do what they want with it. And so as an author, even if your name's on the cover, sometimes you are separate from the project and you don't get to see all the decisions and you're just not a part of the whole process. So it can be a challenge whether you're a ghostwriter or not. It's just kind of part of being an author.
Do you think it's more likely for your name to appear once you've quote unquote proven yourself, or does that not necessarily matter? It really depends on the scope of the project.
I think it depends, but technically, yeah, in the ghostwriting world, once you've worked your way up, your name might start appearing as a co-author more frequently. Like your name can help bring some credibility to the project as well if you're really established. But some of the biggest celebrities, the Britney Spears memoir stuff, there's no co-writer on that, but that was like a respected writer, so it just totally depends.
Aubrey, this is the part of the show where I like to throw a random question at the person that I'm speaking with. Usually has nothing to do with their job. So the question that I have for you today, going through life, we all try different things. Sometimes it's experiences like riding a scary roller coaster. Sometimes it's something more immediate, like deciding to try a new food. I want you to think about the different experiences that you had that shaped who you are. I want you to think of something where in the moment, this experience was nothing short of awful. But looking back, you see that it actually had a huge and positive impact on your life. What would that experience be?
Ooh, that's a great question. Oh, I've got it. I've got a really good one. So, I often don't even like talk about this part of my career, but after I left my first job at a kids magazine, I took a job in marketing and I was a marketing copywriter. And so that's basically just a writer who is writing words that help sell things. So everything was very social media, very website, emails, that kind of writing. And it was for a fashion retailer. And I hated it so much. And it ended up, I'm really thankful that experience, especially having it as a young age. I was like in my mid 20s, I think, later 20s. And it really taught me that like working for that kids magazine was it's not like I was like saving the world or anything, but like I needed to have a purpose to my job. And it really solidified for me that writing for kids was like very important to me. Like having that purpose of like empowering the next generation was like just super important to me. And I did not find it in fashion. It just wasn't there for me, especially like fast fashion. And so yeah, I'm very thankful for that, like having a job that I absolutely hated. So it taught me what that I really wanted to do with my time.
That's a great example, great experience.
Yeah.
It's awesome to be able to pull something positive even from something less than desirable. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I got into children's book writing. So I remember just literally sitting in a meeting and like signing a book deal on my phone, because I was just like, I don't even care at this point, like just get me out of here. Like,
Aubrey, one more thing before we get going. I do like to give the person I'm speaking to the opportunity to speak about something which they believe in, a cause, a project they're working on, the company they work for. So if you have something you'd like to share with us, I'll give you like 1-2 minutes. The floor is yours.
all right. Well, so I'm a traditionally published author, written more than 50 books for kids, but I was always interested in self-publishing. And I came up with a project that I was super passionate about, and it's called the Lookup series. And I self-published it because I just had a very specific vision of what I wanted to do with this, and I wanted diverse women on the cover. And so it's all about, I basically wrote the book series I wanted when I was a kid. So we've got Dr. Maya, ice cream scientist, Angela, beauty chemist, Tracy, theme park designer, um, Z, video game developer, and Amanda, toy engineer. And so I started with Amanda, 'cause she's actually my friend. And then it kind of spun from there. I really wanted to be a theme park engineer when I was a kid. I wanted to work for Disney and be an Imagineer. And the only book I could find was like this very dense 200-page, nonfiction book for adults. And then nothing really ever happened, and it just kind of died. And then I moved to LA and was driving onto the Disney campus one day to meet with my editor. And I got to pass the Imagineering building. And I just like, I hadn't even thought about Imagineering in so long. And I was just like, oh my God, in another life, I would still be pulling into this parking lot, but I'd be going to that building instead of that one. And it just made me question like what was missing, why didn't I pursue engineering? And how could I have gotten there? And so I got to interview an Imagineer and learn more about that path. But so this book is all about just filling the gap closing the gender gap and wage gap in STEM careers, and just teaching girls and all kids. These are for anyone. Just what it's like to be in these careers and what they were like as a kid, and just little things like what's their favorite color, because that's something that kids ask me a lot. And so I think it's just something that helps them identify that this is a real person, do they have any pets? And then they get to learn about how they got into this career, and even just things like what is college, what is a major, what is a PhD. So really just demystifying like those career paths, and showing some cool options to kids. Cause I mean, these are like ridiculously fun jobs. Like ice cream scientist is a real job. So yeah. So you can go to the lookupseries.com to check them out if you're interested.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll make sure that we put the links to those in the description as well, so people can easily get to that too.
Okay, awesome.
Aubrey, thank you so much for joining us today and talking about what it's like to be a children's book author at Time We Discuss.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for popping in the studio. My name is Dan, and this is Time We Discuss. I had a really awesome time speaking with Aubrey, and I hope you enjoyed the time too. If there's a profession that you'd like me to cover, leave a comment below and I'll find that person for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That'll do it. See you next time on Time We Discuss.